If we were to heal everything all at one go, at one time, at one point in our lives, I think we would explode. I don't think we'll be able to get through it because it'll be too much. So it has to come out, in different stages and different realizations as well. I've been processing deeper stuff within my own healing journey, and some deep stuff came up. So I think that took a hit as well. Like you feel it in your gut, right? Like, oh, and then your body needs to break, your body needs to process it. So it's one of those things that happens, right? Also because I'm in the process of writing my book. And so when you go through writing a book, you recall stuff, you recall memories like childhood stuff, and then you get some realizations that you didn't see before. I mean, those are all blind spots, right? When you're born into something, you don't see it. And then when you have realizations, it just feels like, ooh, like someone punched you in your gut, literally.
I went through the same thing when I wrote my book.
Yeah.
And I think it just allows you time to sort of like really delve.
Yeah.
And where it can be, easily overlooked. But I saw it as a way of bringing out all the little bits that you thought had gone. And it's just bringing everything to the surface. And there was a bit of stuff that I was still pretty angry about, and stuff that happened to me as a child that should never have happened.
Yeah.
And, I was sort of hesitant whether or not to put that in. And I thought, well, I've got nothing to hide. Yeah. But it did stir up the jam pot a bit. And I thought, well, this is really good, because I thought I'd dealt with it. And my story's always been to look to see how you can get through it, not to remain a victim. And if it means, talking and sharing that experience with other people, that's how I will heal. And it wasn't until that I was sort of sitting through with it, and it was kind of like reigniting everything again. And you think, okay, well, if I'm getting angry, obviously there's still some issues I still need to deal with, because if it didn't mean anything, I'd have no reaction. But I think that was the last hurrah of that, because everything was out in the open then.
Yeah.
So,
and I think
I totally get it.
Yeah, and it's always a process, isn't it? If we were to heal everything all at one go, at one time, at one point in our lives, I think we would explode. I don't think we'll be able to get through it because it'll be too much. So it has to come out, in different stages and different realizations as well. And all that has to, it takes time, right?
And what do you do when you're in that process of, that real deep internal thought and going through that? Like, how do you cope with things like that? What do you do? Do you withdraw, or do you keep busy? Or
my method is pretty standard. When I have a certain realization, then I feel like, at first the sensation is very odd. I feel like a cognitive dissonance, because it's as if like the reality I thought was my reality is not my reality, and you realize, oh my God, I've been living with this fake reality, thinking that this was how things were. So the mind goes into this mind trip, right? And so then I need to be alone, to kind of process it, and I feel it in my body. I feel it in my solar plexus, my stomach, usually, and I sit with it. I sit with the emotion. I let it just stew in there. It's a healthy thing to do, to allow emotions to stew in the solar plexus, and you feel all kinds of funny shit going on, right? And you may feel some pain, even physical pain, like a gastric problem or some just discomfort, right? And I'll just sit with it, and and without judgment, just allow it, because I learned this, a long time ago, that our stomach, our solar plexus, right, not only does it digest our food, it also digests our emotions if we allow it. The problem is we have been taught not to feel our emotions, right? And if we don't feel, then our solar plexus cannot digest, it cannot break down the energies, it cannot it cannot send a different message to our nervous system. When we go through trauma, right, our whole nervous system is then wired in such a way where it's fight or flight, right? We go into this mode or we shut down. So we have no idea that this is actually happening unless we feel the emotions. And so I have to walk my talk. So, I have to sit with the emotions and just allow if I need to express them, cry or journal, I just do it. And I do it up to a point where it feels like my nervous system feels like, okay, it's just relaxing into that acceptance of that trauma that you didn't know you had, like you didn't realize that you experienced because you intellectualized it. And so that's what I do. And sometimes, depending on how big the trauma is, I would take, I mean, if it's a small realization, usually it takes like, 2 days. But if it's a biggie, it can go on for weeks. Yeah, it can go on for weeks. And then I have to be functional at the same time, right? So I would just hold space, but be functional. And then when I have my own private time, I would then journal or contemplate on it or something like that. Is to allow and not resist it and not try to paint a different picture. I think, we've been taught or we learned that from society, right? That we have to push it aside and we have to paint a different picture, like this trend of like positive thinking out of your problems. That really doesn't work. If we don't address it, it's going to be stuck in our bodies.
Yeah, absolutely.
I was into that philosophy for a long time, and I realized that I did not go anywhere. It didn't take me anywhere, in my journey as a spiritual practitioner or healer, or it did not take me anywhere. So I had to unlearn that and do something that is much more grounded and much more real.
Because it kind of manifests in a different way, because at some point it will have to come back and bite you. Because I find that like in my past, you'll be up against situations where you just ignore it and it will go away, because that's what I hear a lot of people, say and do.
Yeah.
And I said, yeah, but you can only ignore it for so long. I mean, there's a time where you can only deal with so much that's on your plate. That's different as to, acknowledging that it's there, but don't want to do anything with it, because eventually it comes back when you least expect it.
Exactly.
Yeah. And that's one of the reasons why I was so determined to work through all the different emotions with my divorce many years ago, because thankfully I had the hindsight from somebody else and seeing somebody else go through it, and plus other people that you deal with. And I thought, I don't care how long this takes. Like, a journey is a journey, but I am not going to, sort of think that I've got it together now, and then 10 or 15 years down the track, when I'm older, probably a bit more vulnerable.
Yeah.
And then having to deal with it now, like, do the hard work now, because it's, sometimes when you confront these things, it's not as scary or as bad as what it seems.
Yeah.
To compare to just keep suppressing it, and I don't see a lot of people do that. And I think, I wonder why there's sickness.
Yeah.
And there's a lot of other emotional sort of diseases like happening, and everyone does their own thing and to their ability. But I just find, like yourself, deal with it, sit with the emotions, and it has like such a different way where you could be dealing with what you think you've got on hand at the time, but on a deeper level, other things are sort of are shifting as well. And I don't have the words for that sometimes. I just go by the feeling, because I know there's some sort of change, but it's the ability to have that alone time and that quiet time to do that.
Yeah, and we have to honor the process, isn't it? And not try to keep busy and, just focus on things, on stuff that keeps us busy so we don't think about it. That's not a healthy way to do it, But I guess, we only learn from people who, right? I mean, our caregivers, our parents, people like even in school, society, they have not done the work. Then they're not going to know any different. And until we decide that, okay, I need to take things, in my own hands and find out how to get out of this rut, how to, not repeat cycles and But life lessons are such, right? I mean, they keep coming back until we are ready, or we know, or we realize. And unfortunately, majority of people repeat cycles till the end of their lives. They don't even realize. There is no self-awareness, no realization. And then, like you said, right, the illnesses, they then come up. It could be a physical illness, a mental illness. It all comes up, at the end.
And it's interesting because I remember I was about 22, and which is a long time ago now, but I read the book. It was a John Gray book, When Men Are From Mars, Women Are From Venus, and it was really popular in its day. And I remember flicking through it, and and I thought, oh my God, I'm my mother all over. To the point where just because it's that mirror habit, and that mirror, you've got your role model. I'm not saying that I copied everything that I did, but I realized that that's all I knew, growing up. And, right to the point where, to the cake of soap that I had in the shower, because there was no shower gels back in the day. Yeah. And I thought I used to use Imperial leather because my mother did. And, the same washing pad, because my mother used it.
Yeah.
And then I realised that when I was my then husband to be, like, down the track, and, there was things like if I had an argument, with him, I'd stay in a bad mood for the rest of the day. And the very first time that we would have it was only just a small little conflict. It was nothing. He turned around and he said, "Oh, would you like a cup of tea?" And I thought, what? Aren't I supposed to be still angry? Like, you've upset my day type of thing. Now I'm going to be in this huffy for the rest of the day. And he just said, "No, let it go. It's gone. Don't hang on to it." And I thought, oh, wow. And it took someone like that to show me a different way, because I'd been conditioned for so long. And then it wasn't until I realised, I put all the pieces together, and oh my God, so many people do the same thing and they don't realise it until you kind of step out or have something like that that's shown to them. Yeah. And, that's just the way they deal with certain things or with life, or until you sort of step away that where you can see the bigger picture.
Yeah.
I've never forgotten that. It was like a really aha moment. Yeah. And I said, God, and then because, back in my mother's days, as well, you didn't talk about things. Mm. It was very, you don't bring shame to the family. You don't, everything was all internalized. And so then that gets passed down to the generations as well. And so it really depends on, obviously your family, your upbringing, your habits, who you hang around with. Yeah, it's incredible.
Yeah, generation trauma is real, isn't it? Like, we just repeat things over and over until we decide to, you know what, I'm not going to repeat the pattern. And it's really being stuck in a matrix, right? An energy matrix. We're like computers, right? We just do the same thing, right? Until we insert the antivirus and decide that I'm out of here, right? I'm getting out of this energy matrix. But then you jump into another energy matrix, and then it really depends on whether the new energy matrix that you have jumped into is healthier or not.
Yeah.
So it could go either way, isn't it?
Definitely. And like you hear, many stories where they've grown up with a lot of trauma with their family, or, and they've completely turned their life around because they've decided to make that stop, and then to change and to do something about it. And that's kind of what I did with my own family. But, some people are just unaware. They just keep repeating the same cycle, and they're just a miniature version of their parents. I'm not saying everyone is, but you do see a lot of that. And you think, how do they cope? Yeah. I know that I used my situation to fuel the change, but it didn't happen overnight. Like, it happened as I grew. Yeah. And the more ambitious I became, and, I think the insight started to develop, that's when I started to see change, and I started to shift away, and that became with maturity as well.
I think because we have all these whatever experiences that we've had, right, growing up, we kind of train our nervous system to behave in a certain way. And so even if we have a healthier option, sometimes we go back to the old way because it's far more comfortable. A healthier option sometimes seems scarier because it feels like you don't have control. Yeah. And so you don't know what the outcome is. But if you go back into, like an unhealthy environment, the same kind of energy you had growing up, you kind of know what the outcome is. You're prepared for it. And so you feel like you're in control. And so, that's why we keep sabotaging ourselves, right? Over and over again, because we just keep making the same choices.
I know. It's interesting too, because same as with like food.
Yeah.
Like, I deal with this for 20 years.
Yeah.
And people be on a health kick, as they say, and they feel fantastic. They wish they would have done it all, so much, sooner what they've done, and they can't believe they've let it go all this time to make some changes. And oh my God, I can't, they're just totally chalk and cheese. But then when things hit the fan, they go straight back to their old habits. They're just on autopilot. And, it's amazing. I mean, this whole thing about it takes 3 weeks to create a habit, it's not always true.
Yeah.
It depends. And for some people, who are trying to work on that, that can be really deflating, because if they don't achieve it after 3 weeks, what do they feel like, a failure?
Yeah.
So, there's a bit more depth to that as well, because.
Oh, yeah. For sure. For sure. I mean, I used to subscribe to that, right? Like, I would tell people, just do it for 21 days, like, what's the problem? Right? And then you realize, oh my God, the reality is it's not so simple. We are, much more complex than that. And we have to give ourselves some leeway. We have to be compassionate, forgive ourselves, if we drop off, and then we have to get back up again and try again. I received some backlash, like maybe more than 10 years ago, when I created a blog talking about my addictions. And someone said to me that once an addict, always an addict. But I don't believe in that.
No.
I was hooked on alcohol when I was in my 20s, and excessive drinking and all of that. And then I got out of it, straightened myself up, worked through my addiction issues, because addiction is not about alcohol, right? It's not the substance that you're abusing. It's here, right? It's within you and what you are healing, and, whether you're addressing it. And then I had my first taste of alcohol again, but this time is very different. I'm, completely different space. And even if I drank, I would not be excessive. And I've been doing this for maybe past 8 years or so. Like, I would drink with friends over dinner, but never excessive. It's always 1 or 2 glasses. I would know when, if I feel into my body and this doesn't feel very good anymore, I would then stop and consume a lot of water. And I know that for me, this is a healthier way. I think alcoholics may come at me for this when, they may tell me that I'm lying to myself, that once an addict, always an addict. But I truly do not believe in that. I believe that it is how we experience it and how we clear our past trauma that determines on how we use things, whether it's alcohol, a mobile phone, social media, food, anything, right, that we are using as a numbing mechanism. And whether have we learned to get out of it without numbing? And we can use anything, not just alcohol. And so, the belief that once an alcoholic, always an alcoholic, I feel that doesn't give us a way out to heal. It just gives us permission to numb ourselves with something else. We reach out to something else. So it could be you get out of, addiction to alcohol, but then you may be addicted to relationships. You're just hanging on to people to supply you with some self-esteem or something, right? So we need to look at the core thing and not so much about the substance and
the trigger.
How we're feeling. Yeah,
the trigger. And that's interesting, because when I say superficial, it's a reaction, or it's a reaction to the problem. So, a lot of people can't peel back because they don't know what it is. And like many years ago, I used to be a really chronic nail biter, not because I was nervous. It was a habit that I developed. And for me to stop, I realized what it was that created that nail biting, because I could go, I don't know, a whole week without biting a nail, and then all of a sudden, if I bit one, they'll all. And then, so when I would, if I'd catch something or I'd break something, whatever it was, I'd start to fiddle, and then I'd start to pick. So then I'd start to pick, and it generates this energy sort of thing in here. And then before I know it, I'm sort of attacking the rest of my nails. So for me to fix a problem, I had to fix the trigger.
Yeah.
And the trigger was not to fiddle. So then what I did was that one of my friends was a beautician. And so I went in with my stubby nails. It was really embarrassing, but I thought, I'm just going to do this until I get my nails to the top. It took about 8 weeks for them to get to the top. And then I had the most beautiful nails after that. And I've had a couple of like nails, but the same thing is because of, like I'd start to pick. And it's the moment that I break that's when it starts to generate. And I know myself as a coach, as yourself, things like alcohol, food, drugs, they're all just a quick shift for to make you feel good, or to make you it's that quick escape from that environment.
Yeah.
But it comes to the end of the day, you peel all that back. Well, what's the environment? Mine wasn't emotional for nail biting. It was just the trigger. It was just, I had to get rid of the trigger. And so same as like with any sort of habit, some people I know would tend to overeat or indulge in, desserts or whatnot at the end of the night. It's not bad. It's a habit. That because they sit down, they don't know what to do with themselves, and they'll start to eat just mindlessly because they might enjoy the company or whatever the case would be. And then I know when I deal with a lot of people, we talk about addressing the habits, and say, okay, well, let's just replace that habit with a better choice now. And then start to create, let's go for a walk first, after dinner, then come back. And if you feel like something like that, that's great. But because they've made that shift and they've broken that environment, there's a really good chance that they don't want that anyway. Well, my mum was basically an alcoholic, when I was growing up. And that was her way of dealing with the stress and the way of just quickly unwinding from the day. She always worked, really hard. But, that's just how she dealt with that, I don't know. Drug addictions. So that, I'm totally with you when they say once an alcoholic, always an alcoholic. It's not, because that's just an outward reaction of what's going on the inside.
Exactly. It's I can remember very distinctly, times when I'm around certain people and they remind me of the environment I was in growing up. And my first reaction is I tell myself, right, I need a drink, because these people will trigger something in me, right? And I just want to numb them out. And I know that if I have that drink and I numb it out, I would be able to sit there and have dinner with them, and I would feel like I can be there, versus like, oh my God, if I don't have that drink, I can't sit through dinner, right? So this internal dialogue going on, right? And then I'll say, okay, I'm not going to drink. I'm going to sit here for a bit and then I'm going to leave. I don't have to stay, right? I'm going to leave and I'm going to say, well, I have something on. I have something to do tomorrow. And oops, I forgot. Something needs to be done. I need to go now. And so that's how, I kind of train myself, knowing where the triggers are. Now, when I drink the red wine, I drink because I enjoy it. I like the taste of it. I like pairing it with food. And when I know I'm using it for numbing, that's when I don't drink.
Yeah, that's really
I rather just feel the emotions and like, okay, I'm going to sit with this, and like you say, habits, right? We need to find better habits, healthier habits. I read a quote just the other day. It says that we do not plan our future. It is our habits, something along those lines. I'm paraphrasing. It is our habits that determine our future. I like that very much.
Yeah, that's so true.
Yeah. It is.
Yeah, and it always, habits break intentions. So because it's, you can tend to, right, as of Monday, I'm going to be really good. I'm going to eat, really healthy, and I'm going to stick to my diet. I'm talking in my world that I deal with, and then they go really well, right? And then come Wednesday or say Thursday, the wheels start to fall off the wagon a little bit, right? So they go, oh, bugger it. So I might as well just, go in again and start again on Monday. And that happens so much, right?
Yeah.
But when you look at it, and then when I peel it back, it's because they've set an unrealistic goal that they will never be able to succeed, because they've put too much pressure on themselves, and they'll never, the benchmark is just too high. When we start to put things in place that they can achieve, they feel like, well, then the momentum starts to you start to sort of create a bit of momentum, and you can start to see a few, rewards for, the effort that you're putting in, and that sort of naturally, like, motivates you to want to keep going. But, if you lower the benchmark and feel like you're succeeding, that's far greater than just go, oh, here we go again. So because they're such a Monday person as well, I went, great, today's Thursday. We're going to start Thursday, because that whole, I'm really good on a Monday to Friday, but then the weekends come and they don't know what to do. And the reason is because they're in a different routine. So Monday to Friday, generally they're at work mode, and weekend comes and it's a completely different routine. And that's like how I used to sort of try and approach it when my children were young, and my early days of divorce, and like it broke my heart for my kids to be away from me. Like, I thought I didn't bring children in the world for them to be ripped away from me, and so I had to find a coping mechanism. So I used to look at it as, okay, I've got week A and week B. I mean, they're only away 5 days a fortnight, but to me it seemed forever. I had to find a way to make it easier. And so I shifted, the way I viewed the week. And that's what I was, with the people, like, the Monday dieters, start sort of Thursday, it keeps their focus. So it starts to shift away from that weekend mode.
Yeah.
And then they start to sort of, they can start to sort of build momentum a little bit, and then they can start to see that they're actually making some changes. But all it was just creating a different habit. When I was younger, I mean, yeah, I used to drink, but I used to be really quiet unless you got to know me. I think having children sort of brought that out, but I wouldn't hardly say boo to anyone unless, I got to know them a little bit. And so, I used to drink, and used to get the confidence up, and that used to, like, particularly when you're out and you're dancing, if you hadn't had enough to drink, you go, oh no, I'm not going to dance. But after a few drinks, next minute you're this, happy-go-lucky person, and like, all that, all that shyness sort of dissolves. Dancing. So anyway, when we were getting married, we had a rock and roll band that played at our wedding. So I thought, okay, let's start to learn how to dance. And it wasn't until then we started to dance, and we're at one of the clubs that it was funny, that was playing. We went, yeah, okay, we'll practice. We'd had a few drinks, but we were learning the lifts, where they go through the legs or they go up. I remember he gave me the cue, and I think it might have been like through the legs or whatever it was. But or it might have been a hip lift, I can't remember. But because I saw it, and it was such delayed time because I'd been drinking, well, we fell over, but it felt like it was really slow-mo. So I thought, okay, note to self, we can't drink and dance. And then that kind of then got out of that, because I've just learnt to how to dance. Like, you just go in and just dance, like, straight away. You didn't need a drink as a buffer. You just did it. And then that then allowed me to open up to so many other, social, situations where I didn't need a drink. I was happy. I didn't need all that, because I sort of found all that.
That's like fake courage, isn't it? You see people who drink just to feel, like courageous or confident. Yeah, I think we all use alcohol for different reasons, right? Like, for me, it was never about confidence. It was more about shutting people out. Numbing the noise, like numbing the sensation, numbing the the eek feeling. Yeah, it was all about numbing. It's crazy, the things that we do to ourselves, right?
I know. And it's not until you look back and you can see, like, a little bit clearer. But, sort of, because sometimes people just can't deal with what's in front of them.
It's hard.
They just might not have the, emotional capacity or the energy, to do that. It's just too hard, or they don't know how. So
well, it's like a support system, right? When you have people around you supporting the same habit, it's harder to get out unless you have the, the know-how or the willpower to really want to get out and do something different, right? But if not, you're stuck in there, and people can stay stuck in there for decades, right? I see, some people I know stuck in the same patterns and, same habits, that they find it so difficult because they're surrounded by people who support the bad habit. I remember the time when I decided, that I realized that, okay, I'm really, really doing damage and harm to myself. I cut off people in my life. Like, they would call me out, oh, shall we go party? I said, no, I'm not free. So I did that to several groups of people that I would used to party with. And I was alone for a while, like no friends kind of thing. But it was good for me because it was, I think for one whole year, I was without any friends. I was alone a lot and was doing a lot of healing, a lot of reading. We really need to take ourselves away from energies that do not support our growth and any aspect of life, isn't it? When you find yourself trapped in this cycle, whether it is business, whether it is mindset or trauma or habits, or whatever it may be, right? If we find ourselves trapped in the same kind of mindset, we need to think different. We need to pull ourselves out from that and not settle and not be afraid to rock the boat.
Yeah, definitely. And I think, once again, it comes back to our age as well, and having, the wisdom now that you didn't have, 30 years ago. And that's all part of that discovery and that learning and, the confidence. And, that's just acquired over time. It's not something that you just placed on your shoulders, but your environment has a big impact too, I know my dad was a very big influence in my life in my early 20s, when I went to live with him. And he said to me, he always had sort of these wise sayings, growing up. And he said, Lynn, I used to feel really bad when I met a man who didn't have any shoes until I met a man who had no feet. And I went, oh, God, that's, just those sort of little sayings. And he really helped shape my way of thinking sometimes, because just by doing, by having that pinnacle person in your life, at that age, it's very impressionable. Like you're still questioning who you are, where are you going, what are you doing, who do I want to be? And so that was a big difference. So coming from the environment with my mum, where I felt like, I had to break away from those shackles and get rid of all that rubbish into seeing something completely different. It was like I was leaving one world behind and entering another world. But if I didn't have that support there or that guidance, I don't know where I would be today. I don't know. So it really does play a big difference in, your growth. And I think where we are today, in our 50s, that we can look back and say those certain things, but now we recognise when things happened that we can look at it differently. We're not afraid to, meet the challenge, face on and, go, okay, well, I'm not scared to tackle you, because you've got a bit more courage in that, a bit more wisdom how to do it, and you can recognize what the signs are.
The self-awareness, isn't it? So as much as we can share, sometimes is really up to the individual, because I also know people in their 50s who absolutely have no self-awareness, right? Like they're just, there's no wisdom. No self-awareness, no wisdom, and they're repeating cycles, and they don't even know they're repeating cycles, and they will probably remain there to the end of their days, right? So I'm always curious about, what makes a person more willing to look in the mirror or to have that awareness versus one who is, just happy being in pain or happy being in that discomfort and going around in circles. I've often thought about that. Like what makes one person want to move versus another? I don't think it's about a person wanting to heal. An unaware person will not know that they need healing anyway. So what is it, like what makes a person more aware than the other? That's always a question that I ask. Thank you for listening to us. I'm Shamala Tan from Singapore.
And I'm Alina Anderson from Queensland, Australia.
Yeah, we'll see you all very soon. Bye for now.
Yeah, interesting. We're only just touching the tip of the iceberg.
I know. There's so much to talk about, right?
I know. And that's what we're finding each week.